Hey everybody, welcome back. A letter from Birmingham Jail is easily the most powerful required document in AP Gov, so smash that like button and let's get right to it. It's also the most unique document. Whereas the others were all written in the 18th century, this one was written in 1963 by Martin Luther King Jr. Normally I intro these videos saying that I read the document so you don't have to, but I want to encourage you to actually read this one. Don't worry, I'm still going to discuss and explain everything, but nothing compares with actually reading it. It's very powerful and definitely worth it. Since this document is so different though, it raises the question, how exactly is it a foundational document for AP Gov? Well, stick with me and I'll discuss that at the end. One last thing is that we need to properly establish the setting and circumstances under which MLK wrote this letter. In April 1963, King and others were arrested for engaging in a peaceful protest against court orders. On the day of his arrest, a group of white religious leaders published an essay called A Call for Unity, in which they proclaimed support for desegregation, but opposed King's methods of protest and civil disobedience, and instead urged him to be patient. This letter is King's response from jail and can be seen as a thesis statement of the civil rights movement and a defense of civil disobedience and peaceful protest. In the first section, King fights back against the claim that he is an outside agitator, saying, "I am in Birmingham because injustice is here," and then famously noting that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. These are the stakes. In the second section, King establishes the necessity of protest and direct action. Much like how the Declaration of Independence included a list of grievances, King takes the time to mention just some of the facts in Birmingham that justified the protests, marches, boycotts, and sit-ins. For example, he highlights its record of police brutality, unjust treatment in the courts, unsolved bombings of black homes and churches. What follows is a defense of protesting and the necessity for direct citizen action. And in AP Gov, we can apply these words not just to the civil rights movement of MLK, but to other modern social movements as well. He says that the purpose of non-violent direct action like sit-ins and marches is to create such a crisis and tension in a community that it can no longer be ignored. It simply must be addressed. Another key line is where he states that freedom is never voluntarily given by the oppressor. It must be demanded by the oppressed. Clearly, citizen action is required. With this established, MLK now discusses the idea that Black Americans should simply wait for things to get better. He says that this wait has almost always meant never, and quotes Gladstone's famous observation that justice too long delayed is justice denied. And to underline the emptiness of this request for patience, he points out that we have waited for more than 340 years for our God-given and constitutional rights. In other words, we've waited long enough. Justice has been denied, and we're done waiting. The only option left is to take action. The rest of this section is an extremely powerful emotional appeal to the reader to help them empathize with the struggle and humiliations forced upon Black Americans every day. Again, I encourage you to read it. I'm skipping ahead to stay on the theme of time, and in my favorite section, he discusses the myth of time. Again, the advice from white moderates who claim to be for desegregation is to wait. It'll happen eventually. MLK says this is a tragic misconception of time. It is this strangely irrational notion that there is something in the very flow of time that will inevitably cure all ills. I love that so much. Actually, time is neutral. It can be used either destructively or constructively. There's nothing about time itself that causes things to just get better automatically. He continues, human progress never rolls in on wheels of inevitability, but it comes through tireless efforts and persistent work. And without this hard work, time is actually on the side of those who oppose social progress. Again, the point is clear. There's no alternative to direct action by citizens to make change happen. It won't just happen. Now, going back to the previous section, he confronts a key question. How can you advocate breaking some laws and obeying others? This section provides a pivotal defense of civil disobedience, which means to intentionally break certain laws as a method of peaceful protest. The answer is very simple. There are just laws and there are unjust laws, and an unjust law is no law at all. A just law squares with the moral law or the law of God, while an unjust law is out of harmony with the moral law or natural law. Much like when Jefferson referred to unalienable rights that people were endowed with by their creator, King is referring to what we call natural rights in this course. An example of an unjust law is a code a majority inflicts on a minority that's not binding on itself, whereas a just law is made by the majority, but both the minority and the majority must follow. So King feels comfortable urging people to obey the court's ruling in Brown versus Board that ruled against segregation in schools because that decision was morally right, and in turn just, whereas segregation ordinances are morally wrong and therefore unjust. And since an unjust law is no law at all, it's simply not something that citizens have any obligation to follow. Interestingly, King acknowledges that it's perfectly legal and just to have a law requiring a permit to march. However, a just law can be used unjustly when it's used to violate the constitutional rights of some citizens in an effort to preserve segregation. He also points out that everything Hitler did in Germany was legal, and yet it's clear that the moral thing to do would have been to illegally help those being persecuted. When a law is unjust, the right thing to do is to violate it. The next section of the letter sees a significant tonal shift. Up to now, King has made a philosophical case, a theological case, and described the conditions in the South to win readers to his side. Now comes a stark warning: pure pragmatism for those not swayed by the moral case. He says oppressed people cannot remain oppressed forever. The urge for freedom will eventually come. He points out that his movement is based on nonviolence. And yes, you may find the marches and demonstrations and sit-ins annoying, and you may not love it, but he says, listen, this isn't the only movement advocating for the rights of Black Americans. And not all of them are based on nonviolence like this one. If there isn't serious progress and his nonviolent movement isn't successful, he says that these other more extreme ideologies will take hold, and this will lead inevitably to a frightening racial nightmare. In concluding this section, he returns to a familiar idea that injustice must be rooted out by strong, persistent, and determined action. So on an argument essay, you should find it very easy to connect this document to social movements and participatory democracy more broadly. Lastly, I want to address how Letter from Birmingham Jail is a foundational document. MLK is calling for the fulfillment of the lofty ideals within the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. Recall the beautiful words of the Declaration, that all men are created equal, and that the purpose of government is to protect people's life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. Or the notion of the preamble to the Constitution that we the people are the source of governmental power. Or the 14th Amendment's Equal Protection Clause that said states could not deny any person the equal protection of the law. This letter is a declaration that those words have not been fulfilled and that the time to change is right now. No more waiting. So for AP Gov purposes, view this document as a demand to include everybody in that we the people. And, well, I think that about covers it. So until next time, this has been a LaMoney production. Thanks again for watching. I appreciate you so much. If you want to do your best in class and on the exam, consider checking out the Ultimate Review Packet. 3 full-length practice tests, great study guides, tons of practice and exclusive FRQ help and practice. Preview Unit 1 for free. And I will see you in the next video.